everyone, my name is Clentus and welcome to the Iron Bars, my true crime YouTube channel. So without further ado, let's get into today's case, and it is the case of Stewart Wilken, South Africa's cannibal and serial killer. I just want to make a strong disclaimer about today's video because it has strong descriptions of violence, rape, child abuse, sexual assault, murder, as well as mutilation. Let's also not forget cannibalism. So Stewart was born on the 11th of November 1966, making him a Scorpio. He was born in a small town in the east of Johannesburg called Botsburg, South Africa. Unfortunately, there is not much said about his parents, especially his mother, in this story, but there is a man by the name of Duke. I'm not sure if Duke is his father or a relative of his because the man is screwed up. Let's just put it that way. So when Stewart was 6 months old, this Duke person left him and his 2-year-old sister in a phone booth somewhere in the town of Boksburg. However, the domestic worker that used to work for Duke did not like the fact that he did not come back with the 2 children to the house. Therefore, she decided to go to Boksburg and look for them. And there they were in the phone booth waiting for Duke to come and collect them. The domestic worker returned the 2 children home, but Duke was not very happy about what the domestic worker did. So I'm not sure what exactly Duke did to the domestic worker. I can only assume that he fired her, which goes to show that indeed he did not want these 2 children under his roof. As Duke was growing from a baby to a toddler, Duke started molesting him. He would physically and sexually abuse Stewart. Duke was hell-bent in making sure that Stewart felt every kind of pain he could feel as a baby into a toddler. Sometimes he would deprive Stewart of food. Instead, he would take his baby food and feed it to the dog. In other days, he would take the dog food and feed it to Stewart. Stewart's 2-year-old sister disappeared and Duke did not even bother searching for her, let alone go and report her missing to the police. He did not canvass the neighborhood. He did not ask anybody if they had seen his daughter. I'm assuming that's the father, but he just let her go, just like that. Stewart remembers very well that he had a sister and he always wondered what had happened to his sister. But as he was growing older, he started having suspicions that Duke might have done something to his 2-year-old sister at the time. So Stewart, for the next 2 years, he endured pain and suffering under Duke's hand. One day, a good neighbor noticed that there was a child next door and he looked very much malnourished, and as a result they decided to go over to the house and ask Duke if the boy was alright. Duke did not seem to care, so the couple took Stewart home next door where they confirmed that indeed he was malnourished. His head was filled with lice, and thirdly, he did not have a name, but he called himself a Boetie Boer, that is Afrikaans for brother farmer. The couple's name was Mr. and Mrs. Wilken. The Wilkens were the one that gave him Stewart as a name. I'm not sure how this happened, whether they went to social workers or they reported the baby to the social services in South Africa at the time, because it's documented that Stewart was adopted by the Wilkens. So let's assume that indeed they went through the government channels to adopt him legally, because not long after adopting Stewart, the Wilkens decided to relocate to the Eastern Cape in a town called Port Elizabeth. In the Eastern Cape, Stewart started his new life there under 2 loving parents. Unfortunately, Stewart was not good academically. He failed the 3rd grade 3 times. Unfortunately, Stewart also could not make friends because his peers did find out that he was adopted and they would make fun of him because of that fact. Even in school, Stewart endured a lot of bullying and abuse. There was even this teacher that encouraged the bullying of Stewart. He would basically not do anything when Stewart was being bullied by other children. As a matter of fact, this teacher disliked Stewart so much. So as a result of that, being a loner, Stewart also acted out at school. He was known as naughty and disinterested in life as well as his academic life. Apparently, one day Stewart had had enough of the bullying at school, so the teacher that was encouraging other students to bully Stewart one day decided to hit the teacher in front of all the students. Of course, everybody was shocked and could not believe what Stewart had done. In South Africa, you hit a teacher, you are as good as expelled. But fortunately, Stewart did not get expelled. I'm assuming the teacher knew that he was in the wrong, and if Stewart had told on him, he would have gotten fired or disciplined at least. So he did nothing about it. Stewart also developed a habit of biting other children. He would even bite his own mother. However, every time he bit his mother would lock him in his bedroom as punishment. However, on the other side of the door, Stewart would destroy everything in a fit of rage. Sometimes his mother would even lock him in a cupboard just to confine him into that small space so that she get to save all the other furniture that is left in his bedroom. Stewart also had a problem of bedwetting, and he would get punished every single time he wetted his bed. So one day at school, Stewart got attacked by another boy. Remember I said Stewart had had enough of the bullying, so he started fighting back. He fought back this boy that was bullying him and attacking him, but guess who got sent home for that? It was Stewart. The reason why Stewart was sent home was because the school did not buy his side of the story. As a matter of fact, because of his reputation of being naughty and disinterested in school and basically being a problem child, they thought that he was the one at fault, and then he was sent home. When he got home early, his mother did not even bother asking him, "What did you do? What happened at school? Why are you home at this time?" She decided to punish him by locking the door behind her, and basically Stewart was just left in the room dumbfounded, wondering why his mother did not even bother to find out his side of the story. I guess the mother at this point in time had also had enough with Stewart's behavior. Unfortunately, this part of the story, I'm not quite sure what happened to his adopted father, that he is now being raised by his adopted mother, whom at this time is overwhelmed in raising Stewart. At this time, Stewart felt that he was saved by two loving people, whom one of them ended up turning out to be an abuser of his. And it was at this time that Stewart decided that he is going to close himself off. He is going to become his own mother, his own father, his own sister, his own uncle, and his own auntie, and definitely his own friend. And he's only 9 years old at this time. So one Sunday after Sunday school, the deacon of the church invited Stewart to his house for some few recitement and talk about some few things that were going on in his life. Stewart, because he trusted the deacon, he decided to adhere to the invitation and went to the church deacon's house. Immediately when he got to the house, the deacon began to sexually abuse Stewart. Stewart felt helpless. He could not confide in anybody, especially his loving father, whom at this time we found out that he had recently passed away. So I'm assuming that the only person that Stewart felt loved by was his adopted father. Again, his adopted mother felt overwhelmed raising Stewart, especially now that he is growing into a young man, and as a result he is starting to act out, and he's also being a problematic child at school as well as at home. So one day Stewart's mother decided to take him to a reformatory school. So now a reformatory school is like a boys' town. Basically, this is an institution where problematic boys are taken to. Now, do not confuse a reformatory school with juvenile prisons. Even though the line is very thin, the boys at reformatory school, they were treated almost like prisoners. Stewart's first day in the reformatory school was thrown in a solitary confinement for a couple of days naked. So in solitary confinement, Stewart was really hurt by what his mother had done to him, bringing him to a reformatory school. When Stewart was released into the general population of the reformatory school, he endured yet again severe abuse, even sexual abuse from the older boys. So not long after Stewart was brought to the reformatory school, he attempted to run away. But when he did get out of the reformatory school, he realized that he was in the middle of nowhere. And secondly, he did realize that if he does run away at 9 years old, to whom was he going to run to? Because he knew nobody, he had no friends, he had no relatives. So if he did run away, where was he going to go to? But the only thing that he could see, as far as his eye could see, was just forest upon forest. So he was afraid that he might get eaten by lions and other animals that may be preying in the area. And the reformatory school knew that very well. That is why they did not raise the alarm when they realized that he had attempted to run away. Chances are they even watched him walk out the reformatory because they knew he wasn't going to get far. Now, I think if you thought of Alcatraz, that is how that reformatory school was. It was surrounded by forest rather than an ocean filled with sharks. Of course, when Stewart came back, he suffered severe punishment by the reformatory school teachers for attempting to run away. So when Stewart got to 11th grade, he decided to enroll himself in the South African Army. So I'm assuming at this time he's about 19 years old. Remember, he failed 3rd grade 3 times. So when he got to 11th grade, he was about 19, 20 years old, and he was eligible to join the army in South Africa. So indeed, he was accepted into the army, and 4 months later, he was discharged because he attempted to commit suicide. Unfortunately, he had to return back to his mother's house, and his mother was not thrilled to have him back home. He is now an adult and he could think and do things on his own. Stewart decided to leave the house and go and start life on his own. That is when he decided that he was going to do better and also find himself something that is going to make him happy, do some piece jobs here and there, considering the fact that he does not have formal education, although he had gotten to grade 11. So while Stewart was busy being better and basically doing other things that made him happy and also to survive, this is when he meets his first wife by the name of Lynn. On the 25th of December 1985, Stewart and Lynn welcomed a baby daughter by the name of Wayne. Unfortunately, the marriage between Lynn and Stewart was not a good marriage at all. So much so that Stewart would allegedly accuse Lynn of being a prostitute. In the midst of all the chaos in the marriage, Stewart and Lynn welcomed another baby daughter into the family. I forgot to mention that Stewart would beat up Lynn every now and again, and Lynn would have him arrested for smoking marijuana in the presence of children. Eventually, this marriage ended up in divorce, and the court had given Lynn custody of both the daughters. So after the divorce with Lynn, Stewart started screwing around. In the midst of all that screwing around, he met a woman by the name of Veronica, whom he married. And together they had 2 daughters. Unfortunately, this marriage was also volatile because Stewart would fight with Veronica and accuse her of being a prostitute. So it's clear that whenever Stewart did not get his way, and after beating up these women, he would then turn around and accuse them of being prostitutes. I think that was his emotional manipulation type of mechanism. Every time he found himself in the wrong, he would justify it as, you are a prostitute, you are cheating on me with other men for money, and basically that would be his reason for why he is beating up on his wives. Oh, I forgot to mention that Veronica had 2 sons when she came into this marriage with Stewart. And Stewart at first treated them like his own, and that is why Veronica fell so deep in love with him that she ended up marrying him. So Veronica's parents were not happy with Stewart at all because they suspected that Stewart was sexually abusing Veronica's sons. And Stewart would turn around and tell Veronica's parents that their daughter is a prostitute. Ironically, every time Stewart fought with Veronica, he would turn to prostitutes. By the way, all this I am saying comes from Stewart's own mouth. So Stewart will tell anybody and everybody that was willing to listen to him that he considered prostitutes as sinners against God because God had given men the gift to have sex with women, and as a result these women turn around and charge for sex, and he thought that they did not deserve to live for sinning against men. Not against God, but against men, because these women were charging for sex, something that is a gift from God to man. Like, who thinks like that? So Veronica also had enough with Stewart. She decided to file for divorce and kick Stewart out of the house. Stewart decided to go to Happy Valley in the Eastern Cape, where he lived in the bushes and became a mountain man. According to Stewart, he loved fishing, so he went and got himself a job as a fisherman. He says that he enjoyed being in the open sea because the sea reminded him of a woman. He made reference of a sea to a woman. He said the waves were dark and mysterious, just like a woman. He further said the ocean is as moody as a woman. So this is when things started going south for Stewart, when he started his murderous spree. On the 15th of February 1990, he found a 15-year-old boy whom he lured to a park where he sodomized him, and then he started to strangle him to death with his own clothes and hid his body. The 15-year-old boy's name was Monty Fico. Now, Monty Fico was a homeless boy that lived on the streets of Port Elizabeth. On the 3rd of October 1990, Stewart picked up a 25-year-old prostitute by the name of Virginia Gilsman. Virginia had the tendency of getting paid before the deed, and Stewart obliged because he had no problem with paying first before the deed. So Stewart decided to take Virginia to a nearby school where they did the deed, and after doing the deed, he started demanding that he wanted to have anal sex. Virginia was like, whoa, dude, I don't do that type of deed, and I'm uncomfortable, and secondly, you are starting to hurt me while you are doing the deed. Stewart got very angry that he started strangling Virginia so tight that she ended up dying. After killing Virginia, he just left her body in the school ground for the children to discover the next day. On the 10th of January 1991, a 37-year-old prostitute by the name of Marsha Poppin decided to approach Stewart, who was sitting just outside of his new hotel called Breadline. Actually, the hotel was not his. He had moved to that hotel from the bushes because he started making money from being a fisherman. So he was just sitting outside the hotel when he was approached by Marsha, who was a prostitute. So Stewart took Marsha to St. George's Park, which was not too far from the hotel. Like Virginia, Marsha also wanted to be paid up front before the deed. This filled Stewart with a lot of rage that he began to attack Marsha. He put her down and began to strangle her. After Marsha had given up the fight, he then sodomized her, and then he left her there in the park dead. In October of 1991, Stewart met a 14-year-old homeless boy who was willing to have sex with Stewart for money. Stewart took this homeless boy to St. George's Park, where he basically wanted to sleep with the boy, but the boy was like, hang on a minute, I want you to pay me first before we do the deed. Again, This filled Stewart with so much rage that he tried to grab the boy and strangle him. But this 14-year-old boy managed to escape from Stewart, but Stewart managed to catch up with him and overpowered him, and that is when he started strangling him to death. I'm not sure if he sodomized the body after killing him or he just left the boy in St. George's Park. Stewart did a cool-off period of almost 2 years. However, in 1993, Stewart met another young boy whom he tried to convince to have sex with him. He promised him that he was going to pay him. But this young man was like, I'm sorry, I don't do that type of thing. But Stewart continued to convince him to have sex with him and he was going to pay him. Unfortunately, the boy ended up giving in. Stewart then took this boy to Target Cliff where he had sex with the boy. After having sex with this reluctant boy, that is when he started strangling him with his own clothes to death. After killing the boy, he threw his body into the ravine. So on the 27th of July 1995, Stewart met a 42-year-old prostitute by the name of Georgina Zweni. Stewart then took Georgina to a park where he did the deed with her. While he was having the deed with Georgina, that is when he told her that, listen, I am unsatisfied having vaginal sex with you. Is it possible for us to have anal sex? That is going to satisfy me. But Georgina was like, hang on a minute, I don't do that type of sex. All that I do is the normal way of having a sexual intercourse with a woman. But this infuriated Stewart to a point where he started strangling Georgina. He strangled Georgina long enough for her to fall unconscious. While she was unconscious, that is when Stewart, guys, this part is very graphic and very horrible. So either you fast forward a little bit or if you're brave enough, you can go through this description. So while Georgina was unconscious, that is when Stewart took a knife and began to rape Georgina with the blade of the knife, basically putting it in and out of her vagina. She bled profusely, and while he was busy raping her with the knife, he then took the knife and started stabbing Georgina 20 times around the chest area. And then after Georgina clearly had died, he then cut off her nipples and began to eat them. After killing Georgina, he then collected all of Georgina's stuff and threw them in a nearby pond in the park. On the 29th of September 1995, Stewart then decided to go pay a visit to Lynn and his 2 daughters. Particularly, he wanted to visit his older daughter, Wayne. So when Stewart saw Wayne and they were spending alone time together, that is when Wayne decided to kill his daughter. He basically started strangling Wayne till she died. Some reports say that after killing Wayne, he began to eat her. Some reports just say he killed his daughter and basically he just walked away. Now, when he was asked, why did you kill your daughter? He says he had 2 reasons. The first reason, he suspected that her stepfather was sexually abusing Wayne. The second reason, he wanted to give Wayne some peace and therefore he sent her soul to God. On the 25th of May 1995, Stewart meets a 22-year-old prostitute by the name of Katrina Clausen. He decided to take her down to the beach where he was going to have sex with her. So while Stewart and Katrina were busy doing the deed, that is when Stewart pushed a piece of plastic down Katrina's throat, basically to silence her so that the people do not hear her screaming while he was busy strangling her to death. After killing Katrina Clausen, Stewart just left her body lying there on the beach and he left. Oh, I forgot to mention that after killing Katrina, he then committed necrophilia on her body. Somewhere between May and August of 1996, Stewart met yet another street kid whom he tried to have sex with, but this street kid also said, "I'm not interested in having sex with you." But Stewart managed to solicit him enough to agree to have sex with him for money. Unfortunately, when he got to this place called Fort Frederick, I think it's a park in Eastern Cape, that is when he sodomized and strangled this boy to death. So while Stewart was busy basically on a killing spree of prostitutes and young street boys, he met another woman. This one was a married woman with a son by the name of Henry Baker. So on the 22nd of January 1997, Stewart murdered Henry Baker, his girlfriend's child. Did I mention that Henry's mother was married at the time when she was having an affair with Stewart? I think by now you and I know why he murdered Henry Baker. He basically sexually assaulted him, and probably he did not want his girlfriend to find out that he had committed such a heinous crime on her son. He then decided to kill him and hid his body. So Henry was now a missing child. His mother was out of her mind looking for her child, Henry. However, the police did suspect that it was Stewart Wilken who murdered or probably responsible for the disappearance of Henry Baker, because he was the last one seen with Henry alive. So almost the end of January 1997, that is when the police went and picked up Stewart Wilken and put him under arrest for the disappearance and possible murder of Henry Baker. So when Stewart was taken by the police and questioned about Henry Baker, he wasted no time. He just confessed that indeed he is responsible for the disappearance and murder of Henry Baker. So Henry Baker was officially confirmed by his murderer that indeed he's dead. But Stewart did not end there. He then started singing like a canary. He started telling the police of what he's been doing since 1990, killing all these women and boys for all these years. And the police were like, "Are you sure about that?" Stewart was like, "I can take you to the bodies." And indeed, Stewart led the police to some of the bodies that he remembered where he had buried them. 7 he could remember, but he could not remember all the other ones, because remember, one of the bodies he had thrown in a ravine, some he buried them somewhere in the mountains, and he would forget where exactly to relocate them and show the police. But he managed to show them 7 bodies that were recovered by the police. However, when the police noticed that these bodies had some strange things on them, that is when Stewart told the investigating sergeant, and that was Sergeant Noseworthy, who was responsible in interviewing Stewart. Then he told Noseworthy that he would go back to the bodies of his victims and then he would apply vinegar and butter on their feet. This was so that if the police started searching with cadaver dogs for bodies, that the scent of the vinegar and butter would basically distract the cadaver dogs and basically would pass the bodies. The reason why he did not want the police to find the bodies is because he went back to these bodies where he committed necrophilia. And another thing that the police found in these bodies was a newspaper that was rolled up and shoved up into the anuses of his victims. This, he says, the newspapers kept maggots out of the bodies because he liked to go back and basically commit necrophilia. Now, what kind of fucked up is that? So on the 3rd of February 1997, Stewart was then taken to court where he was charged with 7 counts of murder and 2 counts of sodomy. So during Stewart's trial, one of the psychologists took to the stand and told the court that serial killers like Stewart can never be rehabilitated. Dr. Mickey Pistorius also took to the stand and agreed with the other psychologists and said that Stewart will never be rehabilitated. He deserved to rot in prison for the rest of his life. So while Mickey Pistorius was busy testifying in court, basically giving a psychoanalysis of Stewart Wilkens, that is when Stewart stood up and asked if he could go to the toilet. As he was walking, so the court basically took a 5-minute break while Stewart was going to the bathroom. As he was walking past Sergeant Noseworthy, that is when he whispered to Noseworthy that he's going to the toilet to masturbate. Wow. So when the court resumed, Stewart's defense team did not bother to throw any sort of defense about the 7 murders that he was accused of. However, the defense team did put up a fight about the other bodies that were also thrown in and said that there was not enough evidence to prove that it was Stewart who had murdered and sodomized those homeless kids that he had murdered. And of course, the judge, which was Judge Chris Jensen, who agreed with the defense and said, indeed, there was not enough evidence to prove that he had murdered those homeless kids and some of the bodies that he had forgotten where he had buried them. On the 20th of February 1998, Stewart Wilkens was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt for the 7 murders and 2 counts of sodomy. Stewart was found guilty for the murder of Henry Baker, Wayne, his daughter, as well as Monty and 4 other women. However, he got away with murder of the street children that he had murdered and sodomized and some of the women that he could not remember where he had buried their bodies. On the 23rd of February 1998, Stewart was sentenced to 7 life terms in prison. During his sentencing, Judge Chris Jensen said this about Stewart: "You need to be removed from the community. And if the death penalty had still been around, I would have given you the death sentence." Interestingly, the death sentence in South Africa had just been abolished about 2 years prior because South Africa had entered into a new constitutional dispensation, and therefore right to life was enshrined in the South African Constitution, abolishing the death penalty. So little after Stewart was given the 7 life term imprisonment, Veronica was present in the court. That is when the judge allowed Veronica and Stewart to have a short conversation. As they were having this short conversation, Veronica was eating some berries, and that is when Veronica took one berry, put it in her mouth, and then locked lips with Stewart, where they gave each other a long, passionate kiss before he was whisked away to start serving his 7 life term. Another interesting thing that happened at the sentencing, Stewart's mother reappeared. Somehow, Sergeant Noseworthy managed to trace and found Stewart's biological mother as well as his biological sister. Remember his 2-year-old sister that had disappeared? Well, it turns out that she disappeared because her mother took her away from Duke. I think she knew that the daughter was going to experience excruciating upbringing by Duke. As a result, took her away and left him with the boy, thinking that Duke was not going to rape the boy, but instead he sexually abused Stewart since the time he was 6 months old. So Stewart's biological mother asked Noseworthy if he could please send her son a message where he said, "Please tell my son that I still love him despite the man he had become." Stewart Wilkens is still very much alive and still very much in prison, in a prison called St. Alban in the Eastern Cape. It is said that Stewart is tormented in prison because now and again he will see the ghosts of his victims haunting him, and he felt that he really is not doing well in prison because of these ghosts that are tormenting him every other night in prison. However, Mickey Pistorius said that now that Stewart is behind bars, he's playing the victim. Well, that is it, guys, for today's case of Stewart Wilken, South Africa's cannibal and serial killer. So if you like today's story, please give it a like. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, do consider subscribing, and don't forget to click the bell notification so that you get notified every time I upload a new true crime story. I would also appreciate it very much if you left me a comment down below and tell me what you think of today's case. And also share this video far and wide. And thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you next time with a new true crime video. Goodbye.